Alrighty. Hey there. Hey Dan.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Julia. How are you?
I'm good. This is fun. I'm excited. We're live on LinkedIn and we're going to chat today about psychology and security awareness training. And I think I titled this conversation something like empathy and security awareness. And you said like my wife would find that really funny. That's how
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
But
don't think she would attach empathy to me, but
No, but I think basically just as a small means of introduction, I came across your content on LinkedIn. I don't even recall where, but I started following you, and then I stalked you a little bit. I was like, Dan, we're gonna do this LinkedIn Live series. I really think that you should come on. I think that you would be an awesome guest. And then finally, you got back to me. And you're like, all right. I guess we can meet up. And we had an amazing conversation about a week ago, and now we're gonna kind of rehash that and maybe give it a little bit more organization than the first time. But I would love, actually, if people don't know you, if they aren't following you, would you just give us a really brief introduction of how you became a cybersecurity practitioner? You
Yep.
spent some time in the military. Just like give us your story, because I think it's really fascinating, and I think it's just always interesting to hear from people who didn't study computer science but made their way, or whatever, might have had a little
Yeah,
less professional path.
sure. Well, I spent 13 years in the British military, specialising in counterintelligence work. So my remit was to protect people, equipment, and information from hostile state actors and non-state actors too. And within that, we spent quite a lot of time looking at why people do things, and how you can tell people might do things. A lot of time looking at insider threat, as you can probably imagine. And so, kind of over a long period of time, lots of interesting kind of theories and applications kind of were I learned and was taught, and left the military when my second son was born, because I didn't want to be an absent dad, and found myself kind of at a bit of a loss because as though they talk about transferable skills, you kind of have to sell them though, right? Because they're not directly transferable. You can't just go from the military to your average office job and expect them to
Can't
appreciate
just
all the things that you can do.
like, hey, I can surveil all your employees.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I spent a lot of time doing covert surveillance operations, and so kind of behaviour was part of our day to day. And then when I came to leave the military, it just cybersecurity was kind of was a thing. It was just starting to go really big, and it was the logical place to kind of try and insert myself into the career ladder. And so I found myself in a position where all this kind of behavioural science, and insight into insider threat from a counter espionage perspective was really almost directly applicable to a cybersecurity perspective, except obviously we were looking at it from the other way around. So rather than trying to catch people who are doing a bad thing, it was about encouraging people to do a good thing. But the diametric behavior is still relevant, right? They're all effectively different sides of the same coin.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I think it's always interesting to me when I meet people in the military. I think a lot of folks do come from the military and get into cyber. And I have to be honest, there's a part of me that's like, this feels very much like your former career must have been exciting in ways that working in cybersecurity in a corporate environment are not always as exciting. But I guess sometimes there are. If there's an event, you're doing some forensic analysis or whatnot. But
Yeah.
I think it's cool. I think that also, as you sprinkle in some things about what you've learned in your different roles, I think it's really cool how you have been able to draw parallels. But so the reason why I wanted to title this, why we click, and like the empathy around having a great security program, was just all of these conversations we have, the different behavioral theories, when it comes to folks in a corporate environment, and how do we get them to do the right things, like you said. So when we were talking last week, we started launching in and talking a little bit about system one and system two thinking. And I think
Mm-hmm.
some people, I loved how you talked about it. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about how we can make a positive impact on user behavior by thinking about system one, system two thinking.
Well, um, So System 1, System 2 thinking was proposed by Daniel Kahneman, who I think won a Nobel Prize for it, rightly so. And the whole premise is that our minds work in two ways. For purely efficiency purposes and nothing else. So it's an evolutionary advantage. So we have a part of our brain which does the vast majority of our everyday. Your system 1, which is quick, really energy efficient, doesn't really require much warm up. Can just roll with it. System 1 thinking is the reason why you duck when a pigeon flies at your head. It's how it's what you use to determine which queue at the supermarket is probably going to go quickest. But it's not really very good at making deep, informed judgments, because that's not what it's for. System 2 thinking is about really analysing something, and it's the part of the brain that you would use to solve a complex math problem, or to figure out your finances for the year, or to make all those really complicated choices about buying a new house, for example. Mm-hmm. But it's a really, really slow and energy greedy process. So your brain almost instinctively doesn't want to use it. So when you kind of overlay that into our area, most of your human error categories are System 1 thought. Yeah. I don't really like the phrase human error, because they're not necessarily doing something wrong themselves. They may be it could be the system that's generating that action. It could just be they're being tricked into it. But we'll stick with the title for now because it's agreed upon.
No, you're a man after my boss's heart. Because I mean, and I believe that too. It's like, the systems are designed as they, but we'll move on from that. But yes,
yeah. The system design is really important too, though, right? And I'm sure we'll come to it. But the whole premise is that if you can give people the opportunity and the safety to apply System 2 thinking and accept the fact that it's going to be slower, then they're more likely to figure out something that's wrong or that's not quite right. So your kind of really influential leaders, those strategists like the American ambassador to London, they will sit as much of their time as they can in System 2 thinking, because it gives them that opportunity to work through all those complex issues. Whereas Dave in accounts, who just needs to get to the end of the day, is going to live in System 1 thinking because his boss is on him, everything's late, he's got to sort out some stuff for his kids and anything else, and so it will be pure efficiency. So from an evolutionary perspective, his brain will be sitting in System 1 thinking. So when something unusual pops up, he's much less likely to catch it because his brain is running in efficiency mode because he needs to get through everything as quickly as he can.
Yeah, and that's where it's like this idea of, all right, great. Well, so let's just send him a simulated phishing email every single week, and we'll make them harder and harder. That's going to solve this problem. When it's
no, if anything, it will make it worse, to be honest with you, because anybody, and I would probably stick with anybody could be got with the right phishing email, or voice or SMS or WhatsApp or whatever. Everyone can be social engineered. And we know that that's a thing because there are human intelligence agencies in almost every country on the planet, and they do amazingly well. The CIA has a name for itself in doing things like this. It's how they exist, right? Everybody can be socially engineered. So to familiarize Dave in accounts with stuff that he might experience is a good thing. But you don't necessarily need to test him to do that. And equally, if you always send him those emails at a time where he is struggling, and you may not even know, to be honest with you, you may have just had a really nasty morning dropping the kids off at school, he may have been running late and spilt coffee on his shirt and all of those things. The coffee probably tastes slightly of despair anyway. By the time that simulation arrives in his inbox, he's not going to learn anything, and nor are you.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. So my dad is retired now, but he was a commercial airline pilot. And so when I started working in security awareness training, and they take off the plane and then they have like 12 hours while they fly over the ocean to like not do anything, But so he was talking with one of his co-pilots and telling him what I did. And his co-pilot was like enraged. He was just like, I hate when they send me those tests. I get so mad, and then they make me take more training, and I'm just not going to check my company email anymore. And if you're a pilot of a commercial airliner, like you probably don't have to check your email to do your job, but like
Probably
you
not.
should, you know. But like the idea that there are employees who are having this insane visceral reaction, not insane, I don't mean that, a really strong, that's my parenting judgment voice, I guess. They're having a really strong reaction to this experience because like you said, it's like he was probably trying to do something. He was probably trying to like book his schedule and get on with his workday. He was probably trying to handle something and then get back to his life. And then he gets interrupted being told, oh, haha, you fell for something. And it does take so much care to build a program with testing that doesn't set people off in a really agitated way. Because like you said, they're not going to learn anything in that state, in that moment. And
No.
yeah, and it's not accomplishing what you want it to. There's some of this that, you know, like we go back to what you were saying before, where it's just like by design and also like the environment as a whole. So you have David Accounts, and his job is probably metric driven, you know, like how many payables does he get through in a day? You know, is everything on time, whatnot. It's a fairly, you know, probably has like several tasks that he does repetitively and whatnot. It's hard in this moment where we have certain functions in corporate America that carry risk, or I say corporate America, the corporate world, excuse me, but that carry risk inherently, especially David Accounts. That is one of the higher risk roles. But it's hard from a cultural standpoint as the cybersecurity awareness program manager to cut through and be able to make an impact on the cyber culture, even when, I don't know if I don't know if you lost me.
You're back.
Lost you. Okay. I heard it cut out. It's so funny. My colleague warned us about internet issues, but I have full service. Okay, I hear you again. I'm not positive.
Yeah,
I hear you. All right. Anyways, so when you were running security awareness and when you had roles within your, you know, let's say Gymshark, when you were like, okay, I have folks in the organization that, you know, they have a tedious job where they're pretty distracted all day, but they have pressure, they have numbers they're trying to hit or whatnot. What were some of the tactics that you deployed to try and get them to slow down and treat their email with a little bit more of their system 2 brain, so that they weren't just clicking on everything or replying to every single thing?
I mean, there's loads of different ways to kind of handle this. I saw. So, do you guys have Monzo over in the States? It's a bank here in the UK.
Oh, okay.
And they've just released an amazing feature whereby if you set up a new kind of payee on your account and then try to send them money, it holds it temporarily for like 10 minutes or something, and it gives you the chance to change your mind. And I thought that is amazing, because that is you having that opportunity for your system 2 brain to go, hang on a minute, that wasn't actually right. I shouldn't have done that, because otherwise it's gone. But it's a really good example of kind of building in the buffer to the system. So people who are I mean, there's a few different subsets to this problem. So you've got people who are constantly multitasking, who aren't actually multitasking, but they're constantly context transitioning, basically. So moving from one thing to another thing to another thing. And we know that your ability to focus when you're doing that erodes down the more you do it. And so your productivity dips too. So spinning loads of plates at the same time is not the best way to do it. But because your ability to concentrate is also being kind of depleted, you're inherently becoming more vulnerable in those moments to kind of a scam of some form. So one of the things we used to do was to get people to block time. So I'm going to check my emails for half an hour, at 9, and then they'll do their emails for half an hour at 9, and they don't do anything else. So there's no context switching and no pressure, and there's a chance to clear the inbox sensibly, and then they can go on into the day and be as manic as they want. We advised against doing it at the end of the day, because everyone's tired and you actually just want to go home. You don't want to sit and spend time thinking properly. So when you get in after lunch, you're probably, depending on what you eat, if you might be feeling tired after lunch or you may be feeling refreshed, it's important to get out of the office anyway, see the sunshine. and then come back clear through and then carry on again. Because one of the things I know we spoke about before, Julia, was that constant noise of instant messaging, Teams, WhatsApp, Slack, like your Gmail, your Outlook, everything going off all the time means that important messages can get lost. But it also generates that stress. So where people are feeling a cognitive load, they're less likely to make effective decisions because they are struggling mentally with generating the time and space to concentrate and think about it. So basically, you have to accept the fact that you need to give people more time. If you want people to pose less risk, they need more chance. And it's not about you've made a mistake, okay, do some training and try again. They did a really large scale study a couple of years ago now. I'll send you the paper actually, because I don't think this came up last time. But they followed 15,000 people for a year and looked at who received phishing simulations and then what happened afterwards. And what they found over the course of the year with these 15,000 people is if you received remedial training after failing a phishing simulation, you are more likely to fail the next one.
That's amazing stat. That's an amazing stat.
The thing is that Like,
Why?
that's not the end of the story, right?
Yeah, okay.
There's all sorts of reasons why that could be true.
Yeah,
And it won't be one reason for everybody. A lot of people will be perceiving that training as a punishment, so they won't be retaining that information. It'll just be, yeah, fine, thanks very much, but I'm going to put that over there because I'm busy with my job. And you can't blame them, because I guess in a way it is a punishment. In the military, they stopped calling them punishments and they started to call them awards. So they would award you press-ups to try and reframe it. But I don't think it really worked.
Does that work? Okay.
No, of course it didn't.
I'm like, wait, what?
I've awarded you the chance to run to the top of the hill and back. Well, thanks very much. That's what I always wanted.
To watch a 30-minute video on phishing.
It just doesn't work because people aren't you're not going to engage with them that way. They probably won't learn in the style that you're giving them content in, and we already know that they're time poor. So we're kind of saying, okay, you're time poor, but now you need to make more time to do something else that you still don't want to do, and so I suspect that's the reason why none of it stayed in. So remedial training probably is worthless. You need to change the system before that event rather than look at the system after it.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And I think that the thing that I might be jumping around. I don't want to jump around too much because I feel like we had a good.
Yeah, go for it.
It's fine. I was gonna say, it makes me think about just priming, and we talked a little bit about the work that can go in before a full-on training is released, and just the concept of psychological priming, because I think it's such a catch-22 when people are like, okay, I'm tasked with running this awareness program. I want people to enjoy it if they can, but what do I do with the person who is struggling with clicking on these simulations? And it's probably maybe also a user who submits a lot of help desk tickets for things that are sometimes I think there's like this archetype of a user who is the clicker, who is also, so I just did it just now, where there's this idea that like the person who clicks on phishing tests is also the same person who never turns off and on their computer before they submit a help desk ticket. And, they're just like problematic, and technology is a struggle for them in every way. Instead of, like you said earlier, that social engineering will work on anyone if it is the right crafted pretext. And so I think that's where it's so important. And I always try and do what I can when I'm talking with people about how to tweak their awareness program, or maybe implement one, that they need to be empathetic when they're launching it. They need to be respectful of people's time. Like you're saying, if they're already time poor and stressed, and then they click on a phishing email, and then they get more time, awarded.
It's never going to work. And, there's a couple of sides to this. So, we've kind of danced around the idea of psychological safety, and we know that's really important. Yeah. We've talked about how, we need to frame these things properly. So not, try to use positive language as opposed to negative language. But also, we've got to be really conscious of anchoring bias. So the first time, so let's say Dave on accounts is new to the business, and he gets his first social engineering simulation test, because it's a test, and he fails it. His first experience with security awareness is, I've failed a test. Now, the problem with anchoring bias is every event after that, every interaction he has, is a step relative to that initial experience. So he had a bad experience, and then every improvement is improvement from that point. So he won't ever get a good one. He will just start to be slightly less bad. So that kind of positive outlay is really important. And also when you're like, that counts for launching campaigns too. The first time you're like the security awareness program in a business, when it sets its stall out at the start, it needs to have really high level buy-in, decent funding, and everybody's involvement, because otherwise people's perception is anchored in the fact that this is something we have to do, but actually we just kind of say it and then we get on with our jobs, and everyone else will sit there and adjust away. So it really limits us. But I've drifted a bit because you kind of raised priming, and I know we spoke about this before. So there is a point of ethics here, right? Because what we're talking about is influencing people's decision-making processes without necessarily them being aware. So we've got to be careful. But the premise, the premise is sound. So we're basically talking nudge theory and lots of other well-known things, but there's a really famous example in the UK of a street magician called Darren Brown, and he took a group of complete strangers who didn't know each other or him for a tour of London, and then took them to the massive toy shop and said, right, pick a toy, and I bet I can tell you the toy that you're going to pick. It's written in the envelope, or however he did it. And obviously this doesn't seem possible, right? And they all picked a giraffe, and he'd also written giraffe, and there are no giraffes in London, I should point out. There might be some in the zoo, but they didn't go to the zoo. But what transpired is, throughout the day, there had been references to Africa, to endangered animals. They'd gone for a coffee in a cafe where the logo was a giraffe, and repeatedly over time, lots and lots of little influences had influenced their choice when they weren't even aware of it. So what they'd done is all of this information, which they weren't consciously absorbing, had then informed their system one thinking to produce the output that they wanted. So we can do exactly the same thing and use all of the communication channels you can think of but not only that, you've got to be unexpected and fill gaps. So if people see the same warning every time, right, every day for 2 weeks, day 15, most of them don't even realize what it says anymore. You can change the wording to whatever you want, and they'll just see the yellow box or whatever it is. So fill gaps and be different. Yeah, exactly. So I bet you can't. I bet you don't know the exact wording of that external email box, even though it's been there every day, because you stop absorbing it because it's the same. But if it changed color, you'd notice it that day. You'd be like, "Hang on, it's green now. It's not normally green." So the idea, and your disposable coffee cups might be blank. Put something on them. It doesn't have to be something like. It doesn't have to be a security message, it might just be a word or an icon that is associated with the effect that you're after. And so gradually through the day, or days and weeks over time, you're absorbing this kind of information and are setting yourself up to succeed. That might just be the login screen for your device, might have something to do with security on it as a background or a logo. It might be that there's a reminder prompt when you open your shared mailbox that the mailbox is shared, but you still have an accountability for it. Anything like that over time starts to build up, aware of the fact that you need to keep changing it, because otherwise people stop noticing. But if you've got like a big event happening, so I don't know, Black Friday sales, and you're worried that there's going to be something happening over Black Friday because it's a massive point in the year for retail revenue, then you can use a technique like this in the run-up to it to shape people's kind of decision-making processes into being more likely to make the choice that you want.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting just from the standpoint of, people conversations that I'm having with folks more often, people are like, I want to do training more often. I want to be in front of folks. I want people to be reminded. And I think for a long time, just because of the tools that were available, many cybersecurity teams were like, well, we'll use phishing testing as that primer, as that ability to keep phishing top of mind. But it does not do the same thing, because we also know there's tons of employees who see a phishing email from, it's like looking like a Google Workspace email, or it's like Starbucks. You know what I mean? It's like more like commercial than work related, and like they're seeing that, and my hypothesis is that they are really just considering that as junk, but not really looking for those social engineering indicators or red flags. And so to them, that's not a priming experience at all. That's just like junk in their inbox that's taking them time. They're just deleting it and moving on with their day. So I think that's where I think phishing became, people rested on that in hopes that it would be that priming activity. And for
it's
most
easy.
instance, yeah.
Isn't it? It's easy and scalable. The thing about all of this is that we're asking people to retain information and apply it, and like much later on down the line, it might be years, to be honest with you. It might be a day, but it's probably not going to be a day. What reminds you of your wedding day?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I live in the town where I got married, so
Okay. So you see reminders all the time.
I see reminders all the time. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I grow no, but they don't really know. I was gonna say I had hydrangeas in my flowers, and I like am growing a hydrangea right now. And so like sometimes that kind of does, but really it doesn't. No, that's like its own thing. It doesn't really remind me of it.
One of the most powerful memory triggers is smell. Quite often, so the more senses you can involve in a memory, the more likely you are to retain it and recall it. So like have you ever like tried to look at memory palaces? So, like it's really complicated. I've never managed to do it, but you basically you build a mental palace in your mind, and then put your memories into certain places in the memory palace, and you identify all the senses around that to help you remember it. So when you're trying to remember something, you don't try and remember the thing, you go back into the memory palace in your mind and go, okay, well, like it smelled clean and there was running water, so I'll go to the courtyard outside and there was a tree, so I'll go over to the corner, and then it helps prompt your memory. So when we're doing training, if we can elicit, it will use more senses, more than one sense. So just reading something isn't good. And emotion, then you're much more likely to remember it when you need it. Much, like significantly more likely. And if you're just relying on, rote learning, old school, here's a bit of paper, read it and learn it and then tell me what it is, that memory fades so fast, right? We spoke before about Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve.
Yes.
Like there's an exponential tail off. You need to come back to people regularly on it. You can't just say, every quarter I'm going to talk to you for 5 minutes about this thing, because it just doesn't work. It's like me saying, cool, let's learn to ride a motorbike together today, and then in 3 months' time, let's go for a race and see who wins. The chances are we'll both die. Like it just is not going to work out at all. So we're not being fair to people. We're expecting them to function like machines when they're people.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the machines who are like the other machines being used against the people who are not machines are getting faster and more sophisticated. But also we are diminishing the value that the people have, that is to be able to pause, to be able to look at the context. I mean, like, to me, one of the best and most simple questions, and a lot of our training tries to ask people this, but just like, were you expecting this email? Were you expecting this? And if not, then you gotta slow way down. And but this is kind of going back to, okay, I kind of want to go back to the people and machines and patching, and we'll go back to that.
Mhm.
So I'm going to hang
Sure.
on to that. But this goes back to also not expecting people to act like machines, goes back to the psychological safety of an organization. And goes back to just culture in general. And what are your employees? Are your employees expected to respond quickly? Is that such a high value of the organization that it like, are they time poor? They're expected to respond quickly, and they're overextended as it begins. So that is a recipe for disaster. And if the leadership, like you're talking about when you're launching a security awareness program, you need good leadership buy-in. But a good security awareness program, even with the best leadership buy-in, when the culture of the organization is that there's not enough resources, people have too much on their plate, too much in their inboxes, and they're on a deadline or what have you. Some of that is, it's not going to matter because the environment itself has not been engineered for those people to be successful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's also that element of, people talk a lot about, okay, bringing security into the boardroom a little bit more. And I think that that's another element of just security by design when it comes to corporate culture, and making sure that people understand in the boardroom that, like, okay, the culture that we're creating has to allow people to slow down, give pause, and look at something carefully before they just interact with it and do it. And there's so many positive ramifications from that. Like, just I fall into this of, like, I'll kind of hit a small roadblock, and I like text a coworker right away, like, hey, wait, blah, blah, blah. And then I've been known to do this too many times. Like, I will go back, like I'll Slack somebody, and then I'll go back and look again, and I literally am just like, never mind. Like, I just am so quick to be like, hey, wait, this, because I have that kind of like ADHD tendency too, to just, I have to constantly remind myself to slow down, not even from a phishing perspective or a cybersecurity perspective, but just from not taking away other people's bandwidth. But that, if you could onboard your organization, your new employees, and say, here's the why. Oh, this is a good segue into something else we want to talk about. Here are some of the other whys around our cybersecurity program. If you are slowing down, and looking for, fully investigating something before you go to a colleague to ask for help, you're going to have better questions. You're going to learn a little bit more on your own. But if you, with every email that comes into your inbox, if you are taking a moment, especially if you weren't expecting it, really understanding what they're asking for, and then asking, why would they be, you ask yourself the 5 whys, or you ask yourself why 5 times, you're going to be so much more likely to, one, be a better employee and colleague or customer service person, whatever your role is, but also probably less likely to do something that you would regret later, or that could cause some harm. But we talked about this before. I think so many people are familiar with Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, but you said that was another big thing that helped you kind of realize, okay, if I'm going to try and change some behavior and have people learn some of these cybersecurity concepts, I have to give them a good why behind it. And so how did you go about that? And
I mean, this is a multifaceted issue, right? Because this is not about going to people and scaremongering, because fear is a really poor motivator. It's good for like a one-off shot, but over a long period of time, it's really bad at making like a secure culture. So I'd avoid using it wherever possible. People naturally want to avoid loss. Like, loss aversion is something that we all do. Like, you don't want to lose time, you don't want to lose money, you don't want food in the fridge to go off. Like, you want to eat it before, like, you all change what you eat so that thing is first. So we all instinctively avoid loss. But when you're explaining something to people who aren't necessarily technically minded or security minded for that matter, they need to understand why you're coming to the table, because otherwise what you're doing is saying to them, this thing that you do is wrong, do this thing instead. And like it, some people talk about resistance to change, but that's not really it. People will perceive that difference as a loss because it takes more time, or they need to click more things, or whatever it is. So they will naturally be adverse to adopting it. Your why for that kind of security change or improvement or whatever it is needs to be more significant than the feeling they have for, well, it's easier doing it the way that I've always done it. That inertia that they have, that groove they sit in that's really comfortable, the why needs to be big enough to get them out of that. And it still needs to be framed well. Like, it still needs to be motivating. They still need to understand the whole kind of environment around it. But there's no point going to them with full technical details or trying to frighten them into doing something different, because that also doesn't meet them where they are. It just becomes a massive waste of time. I want to go back very quickly for something you said about emails you're expecting, because there's a flip side to this. So watching out for emails that you're not expecting is good, unless the email matches something that you expect. So there's a very famous example in the UK of of National Rail, like one of our big rail providers, making a load of redundancies, like a big redundancy set all in one go. And their security awareness team decided at that moment in time to do an email phishing simulation about redundancies.
No.
And so obviously everybody clicked it, because everyone thought, oh, I knew this was going to happen. So yeah. I have to open this PDF because it's going to be about me. So what that email did was confirm in their mind something that they felt they already knew. So everybody opened it, basically. Yeah. It caused uproar. It was in the national press. It's a really good example of how to do it wrong, because they were just testing them. And because of the scenario and that really strong confirmation bias, everybody failed the test and nobody benefited, because you could have told a mile off everyone would have opened that. It's just, that wasn't the right thing to do. It's not helpful. So emails you expect can also be...
Absolutely. And especially one, there's other scenarios. So one, emails getting intercepted. So you're emailing with somebody else whose account gets owned, and then they respond back with something, which is a big thing that I hear from people who have, bank fraud type things happen, in business where, oh, hey, sorry, we changed our banking details. But it comes from, it has the whole email thread, and maybe it's a spoofed address, or maybe it's an owned email, what have you. So that falls flat there as well. That's where your processes need to be engineered correctly for changing any banking details for your vendors, especially over any kind of legitimate threshold. Because I'm sure you've heard too, but I have heard several stories of just like tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars getting wired.
It happens all the time. But then there's a point there, right? Because we can build, we can have the best security tooling, have really sensible processes, teach people everything that we feel they might need to know. But sometimes these things will still happen, and that needs to be okay, because it will always happen to some degree or another. This is just about managing and mitigating risk, because you can't remove the human from it. And systems have errors. Like, it's happened to me, like the post office in the UK. Did you hear about that? They put loads of postmasters, so people that ran the post offices, in jail because they thought they were stealing money, but actually it was the accounting software they were using generating loads of errors. And so people lost their jobs, went to prison, and it was awful. But the problem was the system and not the people. So it does happen the other way around too. But this kind of error margin isn't really an error margin. It's just human nature, really.
Yeah. That's not a good sales point for me. People who are trying to buy security awareness training don't like to all hear at the same time. That's not part of the business case that I usually propose.
Sorry.
But I know.
We'll move on.
But I also am of the mind that security awareness training is not going to. There is a vendor that says they guarantee that you won't have an event or something like that. And I'm just like, how could you possibly make that guarantee unless it's like unless it's like there's part of the offering that's like an insurance component, which like, okay, fine.
Maybe.
Like if you're selling insurance and then, but like we guarantee no event. And
maybe it's how they're defining event. Maybe they've got a very narrow definition. Ultimately, like this is on an infinite timeline. It will happen to everybody.
Yeah.
Right? The UK Ministry of Justice got owned the other day. Obviously, there's a big thing going on in UK retail at the minute. I know there was a phase where healthcare providers in the US were being owned. It felt like daily, but it always happens, and it always will happen. Like a really committed, advanced, persistent threat will find their way in eventually, and people tend to be the easiest route. There are some edge devices which tend to lend themselves to popping shells, but they're like generally speaking, people are the easiest way in. Not because they're bad, but because they can be manipulated in a way that machines can't.
Yeah. I think that's the ultimate. See, you are empathetic. Ultimately, the reality is we need people to do creative work. We need people to be a part of, whatever. I don't know. We're here. We got to work. This is it, I guess. And so we can't remove people from the equation. Although I guess maybe some people want to.
No, well, they tried it. Klarna, the financial company, laid off loads of people, moved to AI, and are now having to go back again because productivity has been tailing off. I don't understand the finer details of it, but it's super interesting. But it's a balancing act. People are simultaneously your strongest defenders and your weakest link. I hate that phrase too, but in the analogy it's fine. Not because they're bad at anything, but just because they have a brain and it's their brain that's functioning, and the way our brains have evolved are really good at running away from saber-toothed tigers, but not so great at understanding a really complex social engineering attack because it doesn't have teeth, and our evolution just hasn't caught up with it yet.
That's great. Yeah, the reality is it's not a saber-toothed tiger, and that makes it really hard. Yeah,
but then there's a behavioral economist called Dan Ariely who kind of coined the phrase predictable irrationality. So the idea is people always do this, but if we know they're always going to do it, then surely we can then do something to support that. We can't get rid of it, but we should expect those falls and those errors. So going back to Monzo, they expect people to be tricked into wiring money to people they don't know. So they've built in a buffer to allow people to change their mind, let their thought process catch up, or the emotion drain away and go, oh, hang on a minute, that isn't right. So things like that are a really good example of applying that premise and thinking, okay, we know people are gonna do silly things, not necessarily their own fault. So how do we then design the system to catch it? And some of it we can do up front. So some of it becomes around a good choice architecture, it's really sensible defaults, changing the default settings for everybody so it's the most secure option by default. And then if they want to make it less secure within the margin you give them, they can. That means the vast majority of people will leave it as it is, not because people are lazy, it's because their minds are being efficient. Unless you have a particular preference for some setting in a piece of software, you'll probably leave it alone. Moving where a button is on a screen, changing the color of something, changing where it is in the visual hierarchy of your display, all of those things can just help. They don't make someone more or less likely to make a decision, but it changes how people interact with it, and the system itself just might support them a little bit better. That said, we also need to accept the fact that sometimes this is just going to happen. It just is. That's why there's an insurance industry for this, because it happens, and you can't get away from that fact. You might want to rub it out, and we can probably go quite a long way to doing it, but the kind of long and the short of it is people will sometime click on the button that offers them a free iPad because they'd like a free iPad, but not for any other reason.
I'd like a free iPad.
Yeah, fair. I would.
Yeah, right. No, I think that's a really important kind of spot to land on, which is just that I think the other like kind of archaic IT expression that I used to hear more, which is like, yeah, you can't patch stupid. And it's like it's not about people being stupid at all.
No,
And
it's
and
not.
it's not. And especially I always try and remind people when I'm talking with them too. It's just like if you're not in cybersecurity, you probably don't think about this quite as much as we all do. And so if even for myself, if I'm being honest, if there are certain habits that I have that I know could be improved, although I will say I have fully adopted Bitwarden and I'm very proud of myself. And it is way easier than not having a password manager. But it's like even for me, there's something like this year I was like, okay, no, I'm going full till I'm using password. And it's like I've been in security awareness training for 6 years. And so it takes some time to get everybody to adopt every best practice. And and yeah, empathy goes a long way. And also just I love that point too of make the defaults the best option, and then most people will be like, all right, and
Yeah,
not
just
because
roll with it.
they're bad, but because they're being efficient. I love that too.
Yeah, exactly. So like there was a period of time when it felt like everyone's Amazon S3 bucket was leaking information out to people because the default setting was not secure. You change that, and then by default, everything's more secure, and people leave it as it is. But yeah, so like the empathy thing, I know we joked about it, but the empathy thing is really important, right? I think in our earlier discussions, we spoke about the behavioural change staircase model that the FBI use in hostage negotiation, and it's the kind of thing that we need to look at our leaders in cybersecurity applying to their teams, but also to people as a whole. And if you don't know about it, is a very simple model, deliberately. And the first step in the model is just to listen. And not wait for your turn to speak, but really listen to what someone is saying to you, and then what's behind that. So if they're saying to you, I hate this VPN, so I don't use it, and you're flagging that as a security risk, what they might be saying to you is, this VPN is slow. In the mornings when I'm prepping for my calls with customers, it takes 10 minutes to dial in for me to get all the material ready and everything. And I just don't have the time, and I'm worried about being late or missing my targets. So there's more to listening than just hearing what people say. If we can get up on that rung of the ladder, the next step then is empathy, which is kind of where we've been sitting up to now, right? Where we're saying, okay, like that does mean something to them. They're not just being rubbish. I admit there might be an edge case where you find someone who is, but generally speaking, people will have perfectly legitimate interests, reasons, and fears. And once we know those, we can then start to talk to them. So we move from empathy to rapport, because people are now going to open up to us. We've heard them, and we are understanding their problems, and we're not saying this is the way to do it and issuing it like just another warning or something else frightening. We're saying to them, look, we understand. The security gets in the way of people because we're not experts in everything. But when we have this conversation, we can then find a way around it. And it might be that the solution that we move to, that the next step, which is influence and behavior change, is, maybe we have to concede a little bit of ground so that they can do their job. Maybe they do need access to that cloud sharing platform, because otherwise they can't exchange information with providers. Okay, there is a risk there, but let's just make them able to access it, and we'll keep that access under review. Like that kind of empathetic flexibility is the only way you can do it. And I know that's a really simple example, but all of your behaviors, everything you want people to do, like there will be reasons why people don't do them or choose not to do them. And yeah, there will be some people that don't have good, best intentioned reasons, but they will always have a reason. And unless we listen to it and actively empathize with it like a negotiator would, we're never gonna change what people are doing, because otherwise we're just telling them. And for anybody that's ever driven a car and seen a speed limit sign, we know there's a difference between what we do in the classroom and what we do in the real world. Like in the UK, they've just brought a load of speed limits down, so a lot of urban areas are now 20 miles an hour, which is very slow for a car. I am yet to see someone walking around my village, driving around my village while I walk, who's doing 20 miles an hour. They're 100% still doing 30 because they feel like they're going to lose something. And that, like, a completely unintentional segue there. So there's a theory, I think, it's called prospect theory, which basically says, I may have got the name wrong, but I know the meaning is right. So that basically says, I used to work with a guy who never updated his laptop. Whenever we were in calls, it always said that an update was required. I was like, you work in cybersecurity. Why are you not updating your device? And he's like, oh, I don't have the time. I'm like, okay. So, but that seems silly, but that's really fundamental human nature. What he's saying is, I would rather keep a small positive for me now than worry about that big negative in the future. So, like the Haribo test they did with kids in the room? I don't know if you come across that. So they got some kids.
Yeah.
Like one at a time, sit them at a table, put one Haribo on the table.
Yeah. Which is a
right? Yeah, it's just like a sweet.
Yeah.
Little chewy sweet, and says, right, like, I just need to go get something. If you can have that Haribo if you want.
I've seen this.
Or
yeah.
when I come back, you can have two. People eat it. Even if they know they have a bag of it, they'll still eat it because they'd rather that avoid that small loss now than in the future. So the people who are not updating their devices, it's not because they don't think it's important, it's because they're worried about the loss now as opposed to the potential massive loss in the future. So, like, you can change that for them. You can change the whole architecture of the equation and say, right, update Tuesday, where all this comes out, at 10 o'clock on update Tuesday, everybody is having a break. Like, we'll have like a town hall or something every Tuesday at that time, so everyone can run their updates and no one loses any time. That people will avoid making that loss because, like, instinctively. It's not because they're rubbish or stupid. It's because they're trying to do what's right or most efficient with their kind of caveman brains.
I think that's the reality. Is like just that so much of this has to do. I love that. I love that reality of like we have not evolved to be able to deal with this. Like that's just so simple, and it makes such perfect sense. Like, of course not. It's been 30 years of life with computers in this like era. Like this is so new, and I mean, like I think that those are such important. So okay, if we're gonna like hang our hat on a few takeaways. One, you have to have leadership like support in a good program, but I have a few others. What would be your other, like, okay, if somebody's watching this and let's imagine somebody is like, oh, I kind of have a problematic program. Like I kind of need a reset. What would you say to that person who's like, okay, let's imagine you're going to try and breathe some new life into your program. Mm-hmm. What would be your top?
I would ask what their problems are. Do they know what their problems are, or is it just not? Or is what they're doing just not working? Because they're two very different things. I would say that there's a difference between leadership buy-in and leadership buying in. So people like leadership just signing off on it isn't buy-in. They can say that yeah, this is really good, and then do all their business work on WhatsApp or whatever like that. That's not them buying in. They need to lead this. Like, culture is defined by role models so readily that all of your you need to basically have a session with those senior leaders and say, look, to change this, we in this room need to change and drive the change. I think we need to adopt that negotiator mindset and really listen to people. Take little focus groups, understand what's going on. And then just make yourself a big list of everything and sit down with the CISO or whoever and say, right, okay, these are all of the problems that we are aware of. Let's rate them in order and then just do them one at a time. You cannot change culture quickly. You can't even really change behavior quickly, to be honest with you, unless you're physically preventing people from doing stuff. It's very hard to change behavior that quickly, a significant amount anyway. So choose the most valuable thing. do one thing at a time and really listen to people about it. Don't just impose a control and then just be like, cool, we're done, next. Because the chances are it in itself is going to generate problems. And if you are getting in the way of people's work, they're just going to find a way around it. You know how like in parks they build paths that go 90 degrees and everyone just walks at 45 degrees across the grass? Like, build the path at 45 degrees and help them do that. Working with like the control team and the policies like writers and all that stuff to build the path at 45 degrees will make such a massive difference to how people feel about security, and getting them buying in means that you're going to get them moving forward. So just take it one step at a time. Understand what the reality is, not what the map is, like what was actually going on, and then figure out what needs to happen first and increment through. Like, there's no point saying, cool, we've got a cybersecurity champions program and there's 500 of them. Brilliant. What does that do? Probably nothing, to be honest with you. Maybe an additional line on someone's end of year report, but like rushing to things like that without understanding the problem or what you want to achieve are just, you know, it's just going to end up going round in a circle. We have to constantly reset and relaunch.
This is becoming a common theme, even when I've talked with folks who aren't cybersecurity experts at all, but people who are like learning and development experts, and they say the same thing. I think this is just such a, we could probably have a whole discussion around how to gather that information in a meaningful way, because all the time people are like, okay, hey, we're gonna let's have learning and development, do a sales enablement course or something. I'm just like making something up, but it's like, okay, so what are the problems that we're trying to solve for? Oh, well, we need more sales, or whatever the case is, but they're not really unpacking and determining if a course is the right solution to that problem in the first place. But I love that example too. Like, if you're just like, man, our culture is not really good, well, let's do a security champions program. It's like, it's just really not, if that's not, yeah. I think that's a really important ending point of just part of the empathy is listening to people. Before you can be empathetic, you have to listen and understand the problems first. I think that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I probably said this quickly at the beginning, but people should definitely, if they catch this, they need to give you a follow on LinkedIn, because you post. Do you have a schedule that you post? I feel like you post nearly every day.
Yeah, nearly every day.
Yeah. So I love following your content. You are working on another big project. I'll let you share if you want to, but
we'll keep that quiet for now.
Yeah. You're working on some other cool stuff, but people should definitely give you a follow. And I really appreciate you giving us your time, and I'm excited to see what, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of like good little sound bites that we're going to be able to reshare after this, because there were a lot of good little nuggets of wisdom. So thank you again. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to everybody who popped in, and we'll share the full recording after it finishes processing. So thanks. Talk to you later.
Cheers, Julia.
Bye.